So I just did a video on why it's like definitely Bryan Kohberger that committed this crime. So if you haven't seen that one, then go and watch that one. Or if you don't want to and you just want to watch this one, then that's fine, do that. Because in this one, we're going to try and dispute the facts and everything that we went over in that other video, and just sort of like what we generally know about the case. And there's a lot of people that think he didn't do this crime. You know, there's a lot of people that think it was multiple people, or it was even the ex-boyfriend of one of the victims and stuff like that. But we're just solely going to try and sort of dispute why it could not be Bryan in a way. So I won't recap everything to do with the actual like case, as in, you know, we know it was 4 people that got murdered. We know there was 2 survivors, etc., etc. So we'll start with the DNA, okay? Because ultimately, that's what sort of got detectives on the trail of Bryan, as far as we know. So the DNA on the knife sheath was transferable. So what that means is it's not touch DNA. So it's not like he touched a surface inside the house and they got the DNA from that. You know, that it's not like that surface could have been moved from somewhere and then put there. You know, it's like it was part of the house. You know, it was on a knife sheath, which is an object that he could have touched. He could have touched that object outside of the house in a boot sale or something crazy like that. He could have just picked it up, touched it, and then put it down, and then the killer bought that knife sheath and then murdered someone with it, and then his DNA was still on it. Okay, that's possible. That's 100% possible, and that's what the defence will, I imagine, try and push. That was the case, that someone else has bought this knife and that Bryan picked it up along his travels, just being in a shop or wherever this knife sheath come from. So that's definitely something to take in consideration. And then the next thing would be the car. Okay, so the white Elantra, I do believe that he had changed his number plates. I think it was after the case, which does look suspicious. But there's, you know, thousands, I believe, of white Hyundai Elantras in Idaho. So they don't actually, as far as we know, have the number plate of the white Elantra. So there's no definitive evidence to prove that that is his car. You know, yes, he drives a white Hyundai Elantra, of course. So it could just be a coincidence that the killer or this person driving suspiciously around the house at that time had the same car as him, same make. So yeah, that's definitely still something to dispute. And I'm sure, once again, the defence will try and sort of push this narrative of, you know, well, you don't know it's his car, you just know it's a car that looks like his and it's the same type. Okay, that's fair enough. Now, the reason why a lot of people think that he didn't do this is because of the time frame in which he had to commit these murders wasn't long at all, to kill 4 people. And people that either think he didn't do it, people think that he didn't do it alone, okay? Especially when Bryan had said things like, when he got arrested, has there been anyone else that's been found? So another house nearby the crime scene, film had captured on film a car circling the house, right? And it was a white Elantra, and you can see from the time that it was around, I think it was like 4:09 that the house done its last lap. And then there was CCTV capturing the same car leaving the area at like 4:20. So there was a time frame of about 11 minutes, maybe even shorter of that, for him to go in there, murder 4 people, and then leave. Now, on paper, that does sound very quick, you know, without actually making any significant real noise, and there being really no massive struggle. Now, we know that Dylan heard something like a ruckus upstairs. She heard the dog barking, and she heard Zaina, or at least one of the victims, one of the female victims, say, you know, there's someone here. And he also, not only did he murder 4 people, he managed to murder one of a male, which was, you know, 6'5", built quite well as far as we know, bigger than Bryan, probably had quite the advantage to overpower Bryan if need be, or create at least some sort of struggle. So that's the reason why a lot of people think that he didn't do it. Now, could he have done this within that time frame? Absolutely. And there's a great channel called Gray Hughes Investigates, and what he does is he recreates like an animation of someone going into the house, and he's got this 3D layout of the house. And what he does is he goes, right, now pretend you're the killer, and he goes inside to one of the rooms, and he just puts a clock on, and like 3.5 minutes or so go by, and it literally feels like a lifetime. So, like I said, on paper it seems like, wow, how the hell did he go in and kill 4 people? But now you have to take into consideration that like most of them was asleep when he did it as well, and also they were drunk as well. We're pretty certain that like all 4 of them like had been heavily drinking all night, so it's not like they were alert. And also, you know, these kids were used to people being in the house all the time. You can only imagine how many parties these kids had where, you know, maybe they're in their room and someone just comes flying in. Like, I know when I've had house parties that I might be in a room with a girl or something like that, and one of my mates comes like charging in or something like that, pissed up. Like, we had little house parties when I was a teenager and stuff like that. You know, so they're not actively awake thinking that someone's going to come in and attack them. You know, he caught them off guard. Of course he did. So, you know, even it would have taken him actually attacking them before they even realised what was going on. Then add into the fact that they're half asleep and drunk as well. You know, so they just had no fighting chance. Could he have done it in that time frame? Absolutely. Do I understand why people think that it wasn't him or why he didn't act alone because of that time frame? Absolutely. It doesn't seem like a long time at all. But like I said, check out Gray Hughes Investigates, and if you watch some of his videos that he's done on this, you quickly realise that being in that room for 3.5 minutes is long enough to do what he done. So far, we've disputed the fact that it was transferable DNA on the knife sheath, okay, and then the car as well. As far as we know, they actually have no proof that it's 100% his car, and the fact that he managed to kill these 4 individuals so quickly. Now, the cell phone ping is an interesting one because I tried to do some research on how accurate those cell phone pings are, and they are pretty accurate from what I could tell. You know, it's not like he was there a week before and then it pinged on the night. It's not like some massive lag in data. You know, like if it pinged when he was there, it means he was there. And his cell phone pinged going into near the area, and then it was switched off, and then it was switched back on after he was leaving the area after about 40 minutes or something like that. So and he's even said that his alibi was that he was driving around late at night. So he's not going to be able to fight that case that he was in that area. That's a fact. We know, whether he did this or he didn't do this, we know for certain that he was in that area. You know, there's no theory or conspiracy behind that. He was awake, driving around in that area at that time, for certain. We know that from the cell phone ping. So that's something that you can't dispute. So why did he choose that Saturday night? And the reason why I think he chose that Saturday night is because there was a Sigma Chi party happening, which I believe Ethan was like, that was his frat house. And I think Bryan knew from following them on social media, or at least a couple of them, that, you know, they wasn't going to be hosting any parties at the house that night, which is what they was always basically doing. And he knew that most people would be at the Sigma Chi house, and, you know, anyone that potentially would crash at the victim's house would all probably just be crashing at this frat house's party, and they're going to be drunk as well, and this is his time to strike. And I feel like that's why he chose that Saturday night. But, you know, again, this is why people don't believe that he acted alone, because the fact that he entered that house knowing that there was a minimum of 4 people staying in that house at the time, even though there was more when the actual crime happened. It took a lot of sort of guts on his end to go in and commit that. And we know that Zaina ordered a DoorDash delivery and was awake and had the lights on as well. at the time the crime was committed. And if it was him circling the house, whoever that was circling the house multiple times, would have seen that the light was on and still went in there, not 100% knowing whether or not there was 10 males in there, which was could have been likely, knowing what kind of house this was. So that's why people think that he didn't act alone. And I do get that, of course. But the thing is, if he went with someone else, the police don't have anyone else. The police don't have any other suspects, and we have to take into consideration that Bryan was known to be a loner, not really have any friends. I believe he went jogging with someone. There was someone came out and said that he would go for jogs with him, but he was very much closed book. There's been no real people that have come out and said they're really good friends with Bryan. And yeah, I mean, there's just no other evidence, as far as we know, to prove that it was anyone else other than just one individual. So we've argued against the DNA. We've argued against the car. We've argued against the fact that it would have been quite the mission to do what this suspect done within that time frame. Now, the fact that his past shows that he was, a drug addict and just like constantly struggling to be like connecting with people, and I believe that there was like a diary or something that he wrote, and he was saying about how he treats his family horrible and he has like no empathy for people and he feels like he's not even there, and honestly, reading it is just like what you would expect to read from someone who is like severely mentally unwell. And there's obviously times in all our lives where we've obviously felt sort of down in the dumps, and we've maybe written something down that we look back on and think, oh God, I'm glad I don't think like that. I don't feel like that anymore. But what he was writing was very suspicious. And it's going to be very hard to dispute that kind of behaviour or those kind of thoughts that he had. So yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure what else there is left to dispute on that front. Everything else is kind of just circumstantial. I believe it's come out recently that there was actually no evidence to show that he had like messaged any of the victims on Instagram. I know that there was, for a time, people were saying that he had tried to message the girl, like one of the girls or stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe he did it and didn't even need a motive. It was just he picked them for whatever reason. I think I'm going to do my own video on on my kind of theory on what I think happened. But yeah, let me know if there's anything I've missed that I should have tried to dispute. But they're the best things I can they're the main things that I can think of right now to try and sort of argue a case and why I think it's not him. But really, going over those, it just seems too circumstantial to me that it was his DNA. He drives a car exactly like the car that was in the area. He hasn't got an alibi for the night, other than the fact that he likes to drive around at that time in the morning, and his cell phone was pinging in the area. You literally can't argue with that. So if we're going to say that Bryan was framed for this, someone who committed these crimes had a knife sheath with Bryan's, they got Bryan's kohberger's DNA on the knife sheath. They left that at the crime scene, and they drove a car that is the exact same type of car as what Bryan drives, and they chose that night when Bryan was in the area driving, having a late night to clear his mind. And yeah, they managed to avoid any suspicion themselves, and it just was a coincidence that when the police arrested Bryan, that he was separating his trash and making himself look even more suspicious. So yeah, there is absolutely no way in my mind that Bryan was framed for this. The only thing I could see potentially happening is that someone else was involved. But even still, I feel like that's a stretch. I feel like he did this and he did this alone. If there's anything I missed, then please let me know in the comments. I tried to sort of just go over the main sections of it and try and dispute best I can. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.